It's funny how these things work, but as soon as I get off the previous video, this is sort of an addendum, if you will, about the greatest challenge, about what fear-based programming is, right? And I realize how trauma is associated with it. And of course, you got to sort of throw in all the genetic side of things as well. But I was watching, it's one of the reasons why I watch certain programs in the morning, because I realized how the dark side, if you will, or how the carnival barkers are presenting themselves. This is a reality that we believe we live in. So we have a relationship with people. Remember how we talked about the difference between being a lighthouse and losing density, okay? And those who increase their density by accumulating more of what they believe that they need because they believe they're going to run out of it. So they translate what they think they're going to run out of, that they thus translate as fear. So I got to accumulate all the property, all the stuff that can be translated through money because I can sell it and get more money. Okay? That keeps you in lower density. Okay? It does. There's a program that I watch which is called Undisputed, which comes on in the morning between a former Hall of Famer football player named Shay Shannon, who used to play with the Denver Broncos. And he is a black guy that grew up in the rural South. So I know the time period in which he grew up, and I'm very aware of his upbringing and sort of what sort of shaped the world in which he believes he lives in. Okay? So he's managed to make millions and millions of dollars. So he's not going to suffer any loss of money unless the money system collapses based on the value of what that money is that he believes he's holding his consciousness captive to the money. So you can imagine how somebody like that, if all of a sudden he realized when he looked at his bank account that he doesn't have access to that money anymore. Imagine what his reaction would be to that. Remember reaction, the bidirectional mirror? How we react to events that occur in our lives. How do we react to it? Okay? I'll give you just one example. I think I mentioned one time about being in Honolulu. I had medicine that I have to have where I put myself at risk of having a heart attack. Okay? My debit card, my license that I use to get my medicine, because of the state, you're required to have a license in order to get your prescription. So what ended up happening one day, I was in the park. I had a fanny pack on my head. 4 kids on skateboards came by, saw the strap, grabbed it, and there went everything. I had everything stolen from me 4 times in Honolulu by parasites. Okay? So I have to remember everything's going to be okay. Go back in your heart. I am what love is. Okay? Showing more love and attracting more light, everything will be okay. Everything turns out okay. Everything's going to be okay. I'm still here. Okay? Now, I know these things because I know how light works. Okay? But when you have somebody, for example, who has experienced throughout his entire life events or what he's held captive to, that he doesn't want to give up because he lives in fear of giving up the reality that his consciousness is living in, that he's in fear of giving up, letting go, because he doesn't know any other reality. He's running off his unconscious memory of everything that he believes is true about any loss of what he has in the way that he's translated money that he learned through the dark. So the dark has held him captive. So you have a guy named Bayless. He's with the Red Shoe Club. He sort of signals who he's with. On Fridays, he wears black and red shoes. Okay? So anyway, they had a conversation this morning. And the subject of the conversation is this goes back to childhood, okay? Holding consciousness energy captive, fear. Now, because I've taught in the classroom before in the past, I understand how this works, because there are 2 important words that have to do with learning. So, for example, with myself, I love to learn. I got to be learning all the time. So the speed at which I love to learn, which is a new experience, I just learned something new. We used to have an old saying, try and learn something new every day, right? So we sort of realized that once you've gotten out of high school, and say, for example, you're working in whatever occupation you work in, most of the hours out of the day are taken by what? Serving that job in order to get that money. So by the time you get home in the evening, you're tired. You want to relax. This is when we get into another video I think I did on time card programming. It's like chasing yourself on a time clock in what's called a time loop. So it's like taking 2 steps forward, but you keep going backwards in time because you're held captive to the time clock, which is based on money, which is the speed of the electrons. Okay, I covered that once before. So what happens with these beings is they constantly need to accumulate more of that which they believe that they have to have in order not to lose what they're aware of, which is themselves. So they translate their state of consciousness into money. I'm going to lose what it is that I'm aware of. Now, anybody that's ever talked to people, and these are all well documented, people that have had what's called a near-death experience. In other words, they died on the operating table. But I didn't die, because you know what? I'm looking down at my body, and I'm still aware of what it is that I am. So they didn't lose their state of awareness. They simply are, the body's just there. See? Wow. I'm not the body. No, you're not the body. Okay. Try and sort of put that into the spin of the vortex hopper. To sort of put that together with everything else that I said. Connect the dots. So the essential message this morning was the one they were talking about, the Dallas Cowboys, this guy named Mike Nolan, who used to be a 49er coach. Do they need to get rid of this guy because the Dallas Cowboys are not winning any football games, right? So one of the things that Bayless talked about is Mike Nolan was known. He tried to, how do I put this? Put this in the context of an old Dallas Cowboy coach named Tom Landry. Wore a hat, never showed any emotion, never showed any love. And the point he was trying to make, and this is what he's trying to reinforce in the minds of people. And trust me, this is not coincidental right now in the month of October why Skip Bayless would be talking about this. Because it's precisely why they talked about this morning. For those that watch the show, particularly for those that are attracted to sports like a magnet, are going to reinforce the fear-based programming. Why is that? Because most children that grew up in America when they got into a classroom were based on an authoritarian, which is the master, and the slave, which means I obey you. Okay? They don't teach through love. You will learn this, put it in your memory, and how well you did on it is going to be based on a grade that we give you. Okay? That's called compulsory unconscious memory programming, based on a ruler, a rule-based function. So what we're talking about here is what we call motivation, learning motivation. It might be that that child doesn't even want to learn this stuff. They're forced to learn it. Oh, they're forced to put this information into their head. That's right. That's called a violation of their free will to learn what they choose to want to learn. Follow their own passion. What are you, a musician? What would you rather do? Okay? As a matter of fact, I watched a program last night because none of these things are by coincidence. Robert Redford, who was being interviewed about, how do I put it? He says, listen, it was like I was always being held captive. I didn't like public school because it's like they're trying to jam all this junk down your head, and I'd rather go off and do other things. I'm independent. He was actually very critical on what was known as the independent film movement. He's a creative artist. He doesn't want his conscience being held captive by something that's trying to hold it captive. He wants to be free to be able to create and then express the artistic imagination that he has. That's a real artist. Okay? So when I hear this guy named Skip Bayless talking about, essentially what he was doing is sort of putting on the pedestal Tom Landry, who used to coach the Dallas Cowboys. And he said, listen, when the Dallas Cowboy athletes used to walk into that locker room and Tom Landry was present, it was all business. Okay? They feared this man. They realized that if they screwed up or they did something wrong or didn't perform, oh man, the hammer's going to come down. That's called extrinsic motivation, which means consequence, fear-based consequences, motivation. I'm living in fear that something's going to happen if I don't obey. That was his message this morning. And that is designed to reinforce children who are now adults in the classroom are obeying the master programmer, which is fear-based. I need more stuff. I will follow you because I'm in fear that if I don't obey the program, I'm going to lose what it is that I'm aware of, which is myself. That's a lie. When I hold a class, it's based on what's called intrinsic motivation, which means you are self-motivated. You're self-motivated because you want to learn, because you love to learn. You want to learn everything there is to learn about how the cosmos works. How much is out there? How much can I experience? I have infinite creative imagination. They don't want your child in that mode. Absolutely not. No independent thought, remember? So I thought I'd share that as sort of a final clip here as an add-on to the last one, because no sooner did I get off the last video and here comes Skip Bayless on Undisputed, and I'm going, oh, if only I knew the future what I was going to do 5 minutes after the last video. You know how it works, right? When you're in a no time zone, a built-in looking glass. Anyway, I thought I'd share that for the value that it has, because if people can't be, I shouldn't say what people can't be, I simply say this: when your state of awareness, which means what you're aware of, how much are you aware of, can actually be measured by the speed of the waveform that you're experiencing. The higher the speed in the wave that you are experiencing, the more you're aware of. That allows you to free yourself from not being held captive. Now you're free to be who you are. So it really is a speed contest with yourself on choosing to either be held captive or to be free. And once you begin to sort of look in the mirror, particularly when you look in the past, if you go back to your childhood and realize how all this was taking place and how it continually gets reinforced. So what happens is when you live in fear of change, it means, listen, I have learned to survive in this environment. That's precisely what a reptile brain wants, is that you learn how to be a predator through them. Because they realize that the more I take, I believe in my mind, I have a greater chance of survival. That's the target on the back. Those are the energetic vampires. So they program into children to become adult energetic vampires. Okay? Because that's how they maintain what's known as vibration, perception, alignment in a lower density. So you're choosing your density, but people don't understand how they ended up in lower density, and they're maintaining their own lower density speed because they didn't understand and nobody taught them how this works, how light works. That's what I do. I show children how light works so they don't become an adult energetic vampire, that they're stuck in a program that they can't get out of because they live in fear of getting out of it. Okay? That's the challenge. Is their fear of letting go and creating and living in an entirely different kind of reality, one that is based on love and not fear. And that's the truth.